Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When a retired soldier seeks peace in the Arizona desert, he builds his fortress far from nosy neighbors until a power-hungry HOA president declares war on his land. What begins as a trespass turns into a full-blown suburban battle for freedom, privacy, and control. When I left the service 12 years ago, I wasn't chasing peace. I was hunting down control. The kind you don't get on a battlefield or in the back of a military-grade Humvee. I wanted my own perimeter, my own rules, and nobody telling me how tall my grass should be or what shade of beige my garage door ought to be painted. So I packed up, sold off the cold little condo I'd owned in Colorado, and bought myself a single-story fortress at the edge of the Arizona desert. Not a mansion, not flashy, just clean lines, thick walls, solid foundation. The place sat on over 2 acres of land, bordered by sun-baked hills and thorny scrub, and most importantly, it was outside any HOA. I built the perimeter fence myself, steel-reinforced posts, triple-locked gates, and motion-activated lighting. Took me 3 weeks, a busted thumb, and more sweat than I'd leaked during basic training. But once I installed the pool, deep, rectangular, my own design with an embedded filtration system, I felt like I'd finally earned my quiet. For the first 6 months, the quiet held. No nosy neighbors, no one telling me where to park. Just me, the dry wind, and the occasional coyote giving my cameras a curious glance. I'd see the Vista Canyon Hills development across the 2-lane street, a fancy HOA-run community with its prefab Spanish roofs and a homeowners board that, I assumed, preferred lemonade committees over genuine confrontation. They had walking paths, uniformed gardeners, and those smug little mailbox clusters that scream conformity. Didn't bother me one bit. I wasn't part of their system. That changed the day Karen Edwards moved in. I first met her while raking some gravel back from my gate. She walked straight up like she owned the damn road. Mid-50s, pressed khakis, manicured hair so tight it looked like it had never known a gust of wind. She introduced herself as the president of Vista Canyon Hills Homeowners Association and told me she was reaching out to integrate neighboring properties into the Vista family. I told her with a polite smile and a firm handshake that I wasn't part of any HOA. "Oh," she said, blinking at my front yard like it offended her. "Well, it would be lovely if we could include you in the registry, at least for the sake of standards. Your pool, for example. Has it been approved by the Community Committee for Outdoor Design and Safety Compliance?" I stared at her, not angrily, just long enough for the silence to become awkward. "I built the pool myself," I said, "on my land. No community involvement required." That seemed to irritate her more than if I'd cussed. She sniffed, adjusted her purse strap, and said, "Well, Vista Canyon Hills does maintain a visual harmony in the area. As a courtesy, we'd appreciate it if—" "Ma'am," I interrupted, "this property's outside your jurisdiction, but thank you for stopping by." She left with tight lips and a forced nod, muttering something about neighborhood cohesion. I figured that was the end of it. But within a few weeks, I started noticing odd things. Little things. The cover on the pool shifted slightly in the mornings. A towel, one I hadn't used, lying wet on a lounge chair. The chlorine tester slightly off. Once I found broken glass in the grass nearby, like someone had dropped a wine glass and swept the shards under the deck furniture. At first, I figured it might be kids from the development cutting across and getting curious. Still, something didn't feel right. I keep track of details. It's muscle memory at this point. And my place. It was starting to feel used. So I did what I always do when a perimeter's been breached. I set up surveillance. Arizona law is pretty clear. On your own property, you can install whatever you want as long as you're not pointing cameras into someone else's window. I went full recon, 3 weatherproof cameras mounted on poles, motion triggers, and a secure server to store the footage. Took me less than a day to set it up, and then I waited. 2 nights later, the motion alert pinged at 2:17 in the morning. I watched live as Karen Edwards, president of Vista Canyon Hills, climbed my fence. She didn't even look nervous. She tossed her purse over first, then scaled the 10-foot gate with the kind of confidence that only comes from believing the rules don't apply to you. She landed in a crouch, dusted herself off, and waved someone else over. 2 women, friends of hers, climbed after her. They all wore matching robes, wine glasses already in hand. They laughed. They strutted toward the pool like they owned it. Music played softly from a Bluetooth speaker one of them pulled from a bag. The lights from my backyard motion sensors blinked on as they splashed into my water like it was their private spa. I didn't go outside, didn't yell, didn't shoot, didn't call the cops. I just hit record all and let them enjoy themselves. It's not the military way, I know, but wars are won with patience, not panic. They stayed for almost 2 hours, drank, laughed, took selfies. And when they were done, they left through the same gate, leaving behind wet footprints, broken tile by the pool edge, and what looked like lipstick smudges on my diving platform. The next morning, I found one of their earrings in the filter basket. I didn't say a word, but I started preparing my next move. I didn't sleep much the night after I watched Karen and her friends treat my backyard like it was some desert day spa. Not because I was angry. Anger is clean, sharp, simple. What I felt was something much heavier than that. A slow-burning irritation, the kind that crawls under your skin and settles somewhere just behind your ribs. Not rage, not yet. More like insult and a little grim amusement. You can't spend over a decade in special operations and not develop a dark appreciation for the stupidity of civilians who think they're invincible. By sunrise, the evidence was even worse than it had looked on camera. A tile on the pool's edge had cracked clean through, probably under the weight of one of Karen's friends using it as a step. Someone had knocked over a sealed storage bin near the filter, leaving a puddle of sunscreen and broken plastic scattered across the concrete. And the lipstick smear on the diving platform wasn't just lipstick, it was glitter lipstick. It took me 20 minutes and half a bottle of pool-safe cleaner to get the shimmer out. I found more proof as I walked the perimeter. Someone had tugged at one of the lounge cushions hard enough to rip the corner. There was a wine stain on my deck that smelled like the fruity, overpriced stuff people drink when they're trying to feel decadent. And then there was the earring I'd fished out earlier, a little gold hoop with a dangling seashell charm. I held it between my fingers, turning it slowly in the morning light. In the military, we used to talk about souvenirs from enemy territory. Funny how things come full circle. Still, I didn't storm over to Karen's house, didn't call the police. Didn't hammer on her door and wave the earring in her face. Instead, I spent the morning documenting every single inch of damage. Photos, notes, timestamps. Then I packaged it all neatly into a digital folder and sent it to my attorney with a simple message. Prepare a formal notice. Trespassing, property damage, compensation required. By early afternoon, the notice was drafted and delivered, certified mail, and a PDF copy emailed directly to Karen's HOA address. I sat on my porch, cracked open a cold drink, and waited. I wasn't expecting gratitude, obviously, but I did expect some basic human decency, maybe an apology, maybe even embarrassment. What I got instead was a masterclass in self-righteous insanity. Around dusk, I heard the sharp clicking of heels on asphalt. Karen marched up my driveway like she was storming Normandy, carrying a printed copy of my attorney's notice. Her face was red, not sunburn red, but aneurysm red, and her lips were so tightly pressed together, I thought she might swallow her own teeth. "Mr. Hale," she snapped before I could stand up. "This is completely unacceptable." I set my drink down. "Good evening to you too. How dare you accuse me of trespassing? I have never been so insulted. And to send a legal threat? To your own neighbor? Over what? Sharing a community resource?" I blinked slowly. "Community resource?" "Yes," she said, like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "The pool. It's part of the community aesthetic and should remain accessible. Locking it off behind that ridiculous fence is fundamentally unfriendly." "It's my pool," I said calmly. "My fence. My land." Her nose wrinkled. Technicalities. That was when I realized Karen didn't just lack boundaries. She genuinely did not believe other people were allowed to have them. "And furthermore," she continued, wagging the notice in my face, "you cannot record me without my consent. Your surveillance system is harassment, intimidation, and frankly, I felt unsafe knowing you're watching me. On my property," I reminded her. "You climbed my locked gate at 2 a.m. "That is an exaggeration," she said, lifting her chin. "And beside the point, recording a woman in a private moment. You climbed into my pool, fully clothed in sequins and alcohol. That's not a private moment. That's a liability risk," she gasped, the dramatic kind that probably came with stage directions. "Mr. Hale, Vista Canyon Hills promotes a friendly, welcoming lifestyle. Your isolationist attitude and aggressive monitoring is alarming. I will not tolerate hostility in our neighborhood." "It's not your neighborhood," I said. "It's mine," she glared. "We'll see what the authorities have to say." And she turned on her heel, nearly slipping on some loose gravel, an accident that would have been poetic justice if she'd toppled face first. Sure enough, the authorities came the next day. 2 officers pulled up just after noon. I stepped outside before they reached the porch. One of them was Officer Ramirez, who recognized me immediately and greeted me with a familiar grin. "Russ, you again. You causing trouble?" "Not this time," I said. "At least not intentionally." The other officer glanced at a clipboard. "We got a complaint about threats, harassment, and suspicious surveillance activities." I raised a brow. "From Karen Edwards?" Ramirez sighed. "Yeah, she said you've been intimidating her, making her feel unsafe, invading her privacy." "Did she mention climbing my fence?" They exchanged a look that told me this wasn't their first Karen rodeo. "Mind if we take a look at what's going on?" Ramirez asked. "Not at all," I said, and led them to the office, pulling up the footage. I played the recording of Karen scaling my 10-foot gate with the agility of a drunk raccoon. The officers watched in silence until she hit the ground on the other side with a grunt. Ramirez pressed a fist to his mouth to hide the laugh. "That's compelling evidence," he said. The other officer shook his head. "You weren't kidding." "No," I said. "I rarely do." They took statements, checked the property line, verified that everything was legally installed and oriented. By the time they were done, the complaint had evaporated into thin air. But Karen, she didn't evaporate. She regrouped, retreated. And the next hit she launched wasn't petty. It was strategic. When I checked my mailbox that evening, there was an official-looking envelope from the Vista Canyon Hills Homeowners Association. I wasn't a member, but they clearly didn't care. The letter said I was to open my gates and provide community access to the pool, as it was considered a shared scenic and recreational resource. Attached was a territorial map showing a conveniently redrawn boundary that placed roughly a quarter of my land inside their so-called shared zone. They were done playing friendly. Now they wanted my yard, and they were stupid enough to put it in writing. I sat on the porch staring at that damn envelope like it was radioactive. The HOA's logo was printed in glossy gold at the top, like this was some kind of royal decree. Inside, their tone was absurdly formal, so polite it looped right back around to aggressive. Apparently, my pool was now an integral part of the community's aesthetic cohesion, and its inaccessibility threatens Vista Canyon Hills' mission of inclusive outdoor spaces. That wasn't just delusional. That was coordinated delusion. And then came the kicker. The letter stated I was to open all access gates between the hours of 8 a.m. and 9 p.m. and permit supervised resident enjoyment of shared amenities. That phrase, shared amenities, nearly made me choke. They attached a map. It had clearly been edited in some dollar store design software. They'd drawn a soft gradient in HOA colors, pastel peach, bleeding over my entire pool, patio, and part of my workshop. Their fake boundary line chopped clean through my legally surveyed lot like a toddler scribbling on a blueprint. I didn't slam anything, didn't break anything. Just folded the letter, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it in a fireproof file labeled Exhibits, Idiots. Then I called my attorney. I spent the next 48 hours assembling everything I'd need. The deed to the land. The GPS-tagged property lines from the latest county assessor database. A certified survey from 6 months ago signed by a licensed professional. Screenshots of the fake HOA map, annotated with date stamps. The footage of Karen and her squad's pool party. Photos of the damage. Copies of her handwritten friendly reminder notes she'd left in my mailbox weeks earlier, thinly veiled as invitations to community meetings, complete with HOA watermarks and badly written passive-aggressive threats. And finally, the HOA's latest demand letter. By the end of the week, my attorney filed a formal civil complaint in county court against the Vista Canyon Hills HOA and Karen Edwards individually. Charges included criminal trespass, property damage, defamation, attempted encroachment, and fraudulent territorial claims. The filing also requested a restraining order against Karen entering my property or attempting further contact. While the legal gears started grinding, I got to work physically reinforcing my perimeter. It wasn't paranoia, it was just sound tactics. I had the original fence taken down and replaced with a 10-foot corrugated steel wall, bolted into concrete with reinforced pilings. No climbing, no gaps, no curiosity. Then I installed an AI-assisted facial recognition system at all access points. No face match, no entry. The whole setup was powered by solar, backed up by a deep cycle battery array. It didn't just record, it responded. I programmed the system with verbal warnings, sirens, and, if needed, remote alert protocols. The installation crew worked fast. Most of them were ex-service too, friends from back in the day, now working in private security systems. They didn't ask questions when I explained the situation. They just nodded, got to work, and made sure every inch of my property was a fortress. Expect more than letters, one of them warned me. They'll escalate. Bullies always do when they lose the element of surprise. He was right. That same evening, I spotted HOA board members standing across the road pretending to walk their dogs while filming the new fence on their phones. One of them, some retiree in tennis whites, actually shouted across the street, "You're ruining the view." I raised my coffee cup in salute. Good. Then came the drone. No joke, a buzzing, store-bought drone flew over my backyard the next afternoon. It hovered over the pool like a fat metal mosquito, camera pointed straight down. I watched it from my office window, calmly tracked it, then sent out a jamming pulse. The drone twitched in midair, spiraled, and crashed directly into my citrus tree. I left it there like a warning. By the end of the week, my lawyer notified me the HOA had responded, not with a settlement or apology, but with their own filing. They accused me of aggressive isolation, digital intimidation, and claimed that by rejecting community integration, I was creating an unsafe psychological environment for Vista Canyon Hills residents. They actually used that phrase, unsafe psychological environment. These people wanted war, so I gave them one. I expanded my legal complaint to include attempted civil encroachment, fraudulent documentation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. I knew it was going to get expensive, but I wasn't worried. I had the footage, I had the documents, I had the receipts, and thanks to Karen's complete inability to act like a functioning adult, I had something better, a pattern of behavior. But this wasn't just about the courts anymore. Karen was gearing up for something bigger. I could feel it. The smug glances from across the street turned into angry glares. Neighbors who used to nod politely now turned their backs when I passed by. HOA newsletters began circulating that referenced non-compliant residents and threats to communal well-being. I wasn't just the guy with the locked gate anymore. To them, I was the enemy. And Karen, she was preparing her next move. Karen didn't show up for a few days after the court filings went through. Not in person, anyway. Her absence felt strategic, like she was playing at some kind of suburban Cold War, waiting, watching, planning. I wasn't naive enough to think she'd back down. That woman didn't know how to spell retreat, but her absence didn't mean peace. No, it just meant she'd shifted tactics. The first sign came in the form of a flyer taped to my mailbox. Neon orange paper, bold Comic Sans font, because of course it was Comic Sans. The headline read, "Is your neighborhood safe?" Beneath it was a grainy black and white image of my front gate, zoomed in and printed so poorly it looked like something from a conspiracy blog. The text accused me, an unnamed hostile resident, of intimidating families, erecting military-style barriers, and threatening Vista Canyon's sense of community. I laughed. Then I checked my cameras. Sure enough, around 3 in the morning, Karen herself had walked up with a roll of painter's tape and posted the flyer. Not just on my mailbox either. She hit every light post within 3 blocks. She even put one on the HOA's own community bulletin board right next to a flyer advertising piano lessons for toddlers. That was just the beginning. Over the next week, neighbors began acting like I had open warrants and a basement full of pipe bombs. People who used to wave now crossed the street when I went for a walk. A kid biking past my driveway wiped out when he saw me standing by the garage and screamed like I was the boogeyman. Karen had spun the narrative. I wasn't a man protecting his property anymore. I was a danger to the fabric of neighborly life. And she didn't stop at rumors. I caught wind of a private Facebook group, Vista Canyon Hills Concerned Citizens. Someone using an account named Karen is Queen had posted drone footage of my backyard with a caption, "This is what a fortress looks like. Do you feel safe next door?" The comments were a carnival of fear-mongering and finger-pointing. He's probably stockpiling weapons. Why does he need facial recognition? That's what the government uses. I heard he's ex-military. PTSD maybe. One woman claimed she heard gunshots coming from my property. I hadn't fired a single round since I moved in. Then came the health inspectors, an unannounced visit. 3 of them county badges and clipboards claiming there'd been anonymous complaints about unsafe structures, potentially contaminated pool water, and improper chemical storage. I stood on my porch, arms crossed, and let them go through everything. I knew the law. I kept records. Everything was in order. They tested the water. Levels were perfect. They examined the perimeter. Fence was fully up to code. They even checked my garage fridge, which thankfully only had beer and leftover ribs. Before they left, one of them muttered, "Sorry about this. You've clearly been targeted." No kidding. Next up, the fire marshal. Again, anonymous tips about flammable materials too close to the house. I showed him my outdoor propane tank, neatly secured and inspected 3 weeks earlier. He shrugged, apologized, and left. That's when I decided to stop just defending and start digging. I hired a professional investigator, a woman named Camille I'd worked with before. Ex-military intelligence, smart, sharp, dangerous in heels. I handed her everything I had and asked for the dirt. She delivered. Turns out Karen had pulled this kind of stunt before. 3 years ago, she was president of a different HOA in Nevada. Same story. She targeted a neighbor over a property dispute, rallied other residents, started a smear campaign. It ended in litigation, a non-disclosure agreement, and her quiet relocation to Arizona. Camille also uncovered something more interesting. Karen had been reallocating HOA funds into unverified improvement projects, including the exact fencing around her own property. There were invoices from a landscaping company paid through HOA checks, but the work had only ever occurred at her house. Thousands of dollars hidden behind vague descriptions like community access beautification. I had the documents, the receipts, the timeline, and Camille even found an internal HOA group chat where Karen typed, word for word, "If we can't make him comply, we'll drown him in pressure until he caves or sells." That chat log alone was a nuclear bomb. I sent it all to my lawyer and watched the gears start turning. He filed a second civil suit, this time including charges of libel, targeted harassment, and abuse of HOA resources. We also forwarded everything to the County Ethics Board and opened a formal complaint with the Arizona State Real Estate Department. But by now, I knew Karen wouldn't take that lying down. She was wounded, cornered. And when people like her get cornered, they don't back off. They go feral. Sure enough, I started getting emails, dozens of them, from strangers. Half were threats, half were pleas. Some asked if I really hated children. Others accused me of being a white supremacist militia nutjob. One woman begged me to tear down the wall and embrace community healing. Another said if I didn't leave soon, I'd be dealt with. I didn't flinch. I filed cyber harassment complaints for every single one. But then came the petition. Karen had gone door to door and collected signatures demanding my removal from the neighborhood, even though I legally wasn't in her HOA. She claimed I was a destabilizing influence on community wellness. She tried submitting the petition to the county clerk, who promptly rejected it because, again, I wasn't under their jurisdiction. The paperwork bounced, but the message didn't. Karen wasn't just trying to take my pool anymore, she was trying to erase me. The day the petition failed, I expected Karen to retreat, at least for a moment. But she didn't retreat. She escalated. Again. Camille called me 2 days later with a voice like someone who'd just stumbled on a live wire. "Russ," she said, "you're not going to believe this. You're not even on the radar anymore." She's spiraling. Turns out, Karen had been holding closed-door meetings with a few loyal board members, people just as petty and power-drunk as she was. They'd been discussing something called Phase 2 expansion, a plan to push the boundaries of Vista Canyon Hills beyond their current zoning and forcefully incorporate unclaimed properties that benefit from HOA infrastructure. That meant me, my land, my pool, my tax-paid, city-maintained non-HOA driveway, all of it. Camille had managed to get copies of the internal proposals. They'd doctored maps. Again. This time, they included mock-ups of new HOA signs, one of which was supposed to be placed at the edge of my driveway. The file even included projected HOA fee schedules for my property, as if this were already a done deal. But that wasn't the worst of it. Buried in a spreadsheet labeled Improvement Expenses, Camille found a series of HOA payments, all approved by Karen for fencing, landscaping, and lighting upgrades at her own house. HOA money, member dues, used to build a wrought iron privacy fence, repaint her stucco walls, and install uplighting that made her house glow like a damn art gallery. Over $17,000 disguised as community enhancement initiatives. I laughed so hard I almost choked on my coffee. Then I stopped laughing because it wasn't funny. It was theft, it was abuse of power, and it was leverage. We sent the full report to the county auditor and opened a formal request for a financial review of Vista Canyon Hills books. Within 48 hours, Karen got hit with a subpoena. When I saw the county SUV pull up to the HOA's clubhouse and two auditors step out with folders and sealed envelopes, I almost got emotional. Almost. Karen didn't show her face that day, or the day after. But something else did. News vans. Apparently someone on the audit team leaked the story to a local journalist, and once they caught wind that a suburban HOA president was under investigation for embezzlement and property intimidation, it exploded. First the local paper, then an online watchdog blog. By the end of the week, the story made it onto a regional broadcast under the headline, "The Pool War, When HOAs Go Too Far." That's when I got the call. The producer from a national current affairs show, Stand Your Ground, left a message on my business line. They wanted me to come on, tell my side of the story. I hesitated for all of 20 seconds. Then I called them back and said, when and where. I flew out the next week, wearing jeans, a button-up, and my usual attitude. The segment was taped in one take. I laid it all out. The trespassing, the harassment, the fake maps, the financial fraud. I even showed clips from the security footage. The host shook his head like he couldn't believe it. I believed it just fine. When it aired, the internet did what it always does. It caught fire. The video racked up over 400,000 views in the first 48 hours. Comments flooded in. Other homeowners across the country shared their stories of HOA harassment, manipulation, extortion. I got emails, real ones this time, thanking me for standing up. But not everyone was thrilled. Back home, Karen emerged from hiding like a rabid groundhog. She called a special emergency board meeting, closed to the public, where she tried to rally her inner circle to declare my legal filings null due to community conflict of interest. It was nonsense, legally speaking, but that didn't stop her from trying. Then she went door to door again, but not with flyers this time, with a personal pitch, whispering lies. He's out for revenge. He hates women. He's going to get our neighborhood declared unsafe. Camille recorded one of these conversations from a neighbor's porch. It was slander, plain and simple. That tape went straight to my lawyer. And while all this was going on, Karen's husband, some tight-faced real estate attorney named Gregory, decided to poke his head in. He started filing procedural objections, trying to slow down the lawsuits. Claimed I was interfering with community governance, and even suggested that my property value was inherently tied to Vista Canyon's aesthetic profile. My attorney, bless him, replied with a 7-page motion that basically boiled down to sit down and shut up. Meanwhile, the county audit wrapped up. Their findings were everything I'd hoped for. Karen's misappropriation of funds was now officially documented. $17,000 for fencing, $3,000 for patio renovations, a few thousand more for an HOA promotional dinner that turned out to be her birthday party at a local winery, all billed to Vista Canyon Hills. The HOA board members began jumping ship. One resigned, another lawyered up. A third begged Camille to remove his name from the group chat logs. I wasn't just winning, I was burning down her whole crooked empire. The court date was set. 3 weeks from the day the audit findings were released, Karen would face a judge, and not just as the HOA president with a clipboard and a superiority complex. No, she'd be sitting there as a defendant, charged with trespassing, property damage, financial misconduct, and defamation. I'd be across from her with a folder full of receipts, videos, maps, and sworn statements. My side was locked in, solid. But Karen wasn't going down without a spectacle. First, she filed an emergency injunction to delay the proceedings, claiming she was suffering from extreme psychological duress due to community aggression. The court denied it within 48 hours. Next, she showed up at the HOA clubhouse for the first time in weeks, wearing dark glasses and a neck brace. A neck brace. The woman hadn't been in any accident, but I guess she thought the visual would help sell whatever performance she had planned. She called a press conference outside the community center. Only 2 local stations showed up. She read from a prepared statement, voice trembling, accusing me of coordinated harassment, digital stalking, and, my personal favorite, intentional social exile. She wrapped it up with, "I only ever wanted a safe, unified community." And I've been persecuted for it. No questions allowed. She left before the cameras stopped rolling. I didn't respond publicly. I didn't need to. The subpoenas had been served. Her whole HOA board had been restructured under court order. The finances were under audit supervision, and the county had formally denied Vista Canyon Hills' request to revise zoning parameters for the second time in a month. Every move she made was collapsing under her own weight. Then came the tampering. A week before the trial, I woke up to find a pair of tire marks across my front yard. Not a joyride. Calculated. They cut across the gravel and straight through a section of cactus I'd planted last spring. They also took out one of the ground-level security lights. I pulled the footage. 2 in the morning. A black SUV. No plates. Driver never got out, just coasted across my yard like it was a statement. Camille traced the vehicle to a rental agency. No ID on the driver, paid in cash. The message was clear. You're not untouchable. My response was equally clear. I upgraded the perimeter system again, added 2 new drones, auto-activated floodlights, and a motion-sensitive speaker system that blared high-frequency alarms when activated. I wasn't bluffing anymore. You step on my land now, you leave with a migraine and a police report. Still, Karen wasn't done. The day before court, her lawyer filed a last-ditch settlement offer. A pathetic document suggesting we mutually agree to cease all public commentary, withdraw legal actions, and restore neighborhood peace. They offered to pay for a new pool filter as a gesture of goodwill. I told my attorney to file it under desperate trash. The next morning, I put on a dark gray suit, polished boots, and clipped my hair tighter than usual. Not for show, for war. I walked into that courtroom like it was a debriefing room back in Kandahar, calm, focused, already 3 steps ahead. Karen sat at the defendant's table in a conservative blazer and pearls, the neck brace mysteriously absent. Her face was made up, her smile plastered on like drywall mud over a cracked foundation. Her lawyer, Gregory, her husband, looked like he hadn't slept in a week. The judge, a man with tired eyes and a no-nonsense tone, opened with a dry but clear statement. This is a civil hearing regarding trespassing, financial misconduct, and personal harassment. Counsel, begin. Karen's team tried everything. They downplayed the trespassing, an isolated misunderstanding. They denied the damage, wear and tear from weather. They tried to spin the HOA map as an exploratory draft. And when it came to the financial misuse, they blamed it on a clerical oversight and claimed that all expenditures had board consensus. But the documents said otherwise. My attorney laid out every violation in order. The footage of Karen climbing the fence, the broken tile and destroyed property, the forged map with HOA logo metadata, the email chains with her board approving fake improvements at her house, the video of her saying, "We'll pressure him until he caves." Then we presented the facial recognition log showing failed attempts at entry, dozens of them, some even after the lawsuit had been filed. Then came Camille's testimony. She took the stand like a scalpel, clean, calm, deadly. She described the rental SUV, the anonymous flyers, the slander campaign. Every question was met with a concise, irrefutable answer. Karen tried to object. Her lawyer tried to suppress parts of the chat logs, claiming private board communication. The judge overruled him. At one point, Karen muttered something under her breath. The mic picked it up. "She deserves worse," she hissed, referring to Camille. The courtroom went silent. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Ms. Edwards, you'll restrain yourself or be removed." Karen sat back, cheeks flushed with rage. That mask of respectability was slipping. By the end of the day, we'd left a crater in her defense. Her lawyer stopped objecting. He knew it was over. Her posture collapsed inward. Her arrogance evaporated. The judge called a recess and scheduled closing arguments for the following day. I walked out of that courthouse with the sun in my face and the taste of steel in my mouth. We weren't done yet, but the battlefield was mine. The morning of closing arguments, the air felt different. Not the weather, just the atmosphere. Tighter, like the whole courtroom was a balloon on the verge of bursting. Karen walked in with the stiffness of someone who already knew she was about to lose. Her hair was pulled back too tight, her blazer buttoned like armor, but the bags under her eyes told the truth. She hadn't slept. I had. My lawyer and I went in clear, concise, controlled. Our opening for the day was simple. This wasn't about personality clashes or neighborly misunderstandings or any of the crap Karen's camp kept peddling. It was about ownership, boundaries, and consequences. He laid it out clean. Trespassing wasn't just a technical infraction, it was a willful violation of private property, documented repeatedly with time-stamped evidence. Fraudulent documents weren't just mistakes, they were intentional manipulations used to try and seize control of someone else's land. And HOA funds weren't Karen's personal piggy bank. Then came the judge's turn. He didn't draw it out. He acknowledged the depth and credibility of the evidence, the consistency of our timeline, and the sheer weight of documentation. He labeled Karen's behavior a sustained pattern of abuse of power and community trust. Her actions, he said, represented a clear and unlawful attempt to expand authority over a non-consenting property owner using forged materials, coordinated social pressure, and misappropriated funds. Then he dropped the gavel, figuratively and legally. Karen was found guilty of trespassing, malicious property damage, intentional harassment, and fraudulent use of HOA resources. The judge ordered her to pay me $42,000 in damages, cover all legal expenses, receive 15 months of probation, and immediately resign from any HOA position within the county. But it didn't stop there. The HOA itself was placed under court-supervised review, and the judge issued a formal mandate requiring them to revise their bylaws, audit all expenses from the past 3 years, and hold special elections for new board leadership. Karen didn't say a word during the ruling. She just sat there, stone still, jaw locked, hands shaking in her lap. Her husband looked like someone had just kicked out the floor beneath him. Camille leaned over to me and whispered, "I almost feel bad for them." I didn't. When we left the courthouse, there were reporters outside. Not many, but enough. I gave one short statement. This was never about a pool. This was about control. And that control ends here. Then I got in my truck, turned the key, and drove home to my quiet corner of the desert. But the fight wasn't completely over. Karen still had influence, and it showed in the days that followed. Some of the HOA faithful doubled down. I started noticing unfamiliar cars slowly passing my driveway, slowing just a bit too long. A few anonymous notes were left in my mailbox. One of them said, "Better watch your back." Another was just a photo of my house with the word parasite written in marker across it. I sent them all to Camille and the sheriff's department. We added them to the harassment log, but most of the neighborhood, they were done with her. The news spread fast. The audit results became public record, and when residents started reading how their fees had funded Karen's private upgrades, the tide turned fast. A few knocked on my gate to apologize. One guy, retired firefighter, brought a six-pack and said, "I didn't know the whole story. I should have. We were wrong. I didn't throw a party, didn't do victory laps. I just added more gravel around the perimeter, adjusted the motion sensitivity on the cameras, and slept like a baby for the first time in months." The HOA board, they held their special election. Karen didn't even run. She was too busy packing. One afternoon, I saw the movers loading up her overpriced patio furniture, the fake terracotta pots, and the endless bins of HOA folders that I imagined were now more liability than leverage. She left without a word. No wave, no glare, just the hiss of hydraulic brakes and the soft whine of defeat. That night, I posted a new sign on my gate, a custom metal plate with laser-cut letters. Private property if you want to swim. Build your own damn pool. A year passed. 12 months of clean skies, quiet mornings, and hot coffee on the back porch with no one watching me through binoculars or pretending my pool was a public monument. The land settled. The lawsuits ended. Even the desert seemed to breathe easier. Karen was gone. Not just from the HOA, not just from the neighborhood, but from the entire zip code. Camille told me she'd sold her house at a loss, moved to a gated community in California, and was taking a break from civic leadership. Translation: nobody else wanted her near a boardroom. Her husband quietly retired early, and last I heard, was golfing alone and blaming the world. Vista Canyon Hills had changed. After the court-ordered elections, the new HOA president, a younger guy named Marcus, reached out to me, carefully, politely. Said he'd reviewed the case, understood the past, and was interested in reforming the HOA's culture. Asked if I'd be willing to consult on neighbor relations. I thanked him, declined, and offered instead to write a public open letter they could distribute to all residents. A summary of my case, my rights, and a reminder. You don't need a badge to abuse power, just people too afraid to say no. He printed it. A few months later, I started getting messages. Not from Vista Canyon, but from across the state. Then across the country. Homeowners, veterans, single moms, retirees, all of them asking the same thing. How do I fight back? That's when a producer from the Stand Your Ground show called again. Said the segment had gone viral and they wanted a follow-up. This time, a panel, National HOA Reform, Property Rights, Legal Overreach. I said yes. That panel turned into a podcast appearance. The podcast turned into interviews with legal YouTubers. Then I started recording my own clips. Tips on securing your land, identifying HOA overreach, how to read your deed, what to do if someone tampers with your survey. At first, it was just for fun. Then it took off. I called the channel No Trespass Nation. Within 6 months, I had over 100,000 subscribers. Sponsors came knocking, home security brands, legal self-help platforms. I partnered with Camille to create a toolkit, templates for cease and desist letters, HOA clause decoders, security system guides for suburban lots. My little business, Hale Security Solutions, shifted. I started offering consultations not just on surveillance, but on property protection strategy, the kind of stuff no one teaches you until someone's trying to annex your pool in broad daylight. I didn't become famous, didn't want to, but I became something better, useful. People listened, not because I was loud, but because I'd been through the fire and didn't flinch. Now, when I sit on my porch and watch the horizon glow orange as the sun slips behind the mountains, I hear silence. Good silence. Peace. The kind you earn. The sign still hangs on my gate, but I added a second one beneath it. Smaller. Burnished steel. No trespassing, no excuses, no HR.